Who knows what's a different hormone? Who has a different? It might help us as we try to regulate metabolism. Insulin, very good. What does insulin do? It decreases blood glucose. What the hell? Where does it make the glucose go? Into glycogen and into fat. Where might that glycogen be located? Come on. Okay, good. I'm going to read from the slide. Muscle, liver, adipose tissue. Okay. Insulin drives glucose into muscle cells primarily. And if stuff is left, right, when do you release glucose? Or when do you release insulin? That's right, when I have too much glucose in the blood. Those of you that ate breakfast this morning, had some carbs, your insulin goes up, right? Insulin goes up, drives the glucose in, glucose comes down, insulin then follows. Okay. So that's another piece of all of this that we need to kind of keep in mind. Glucose also comes from the pancreas. Insulin also comes from the pancreas. Okay? So oftentimes, insulin and glucagon are considered to be sort of counter-regulatory, kind of opposites of each other. Insulin drives glucose, lowers blood glucose, drives it to muscle. Glucagon raises blood glucose. Right? So we'll talk a little bit in just a few minutes about if we can ever get things up, about what that's going to do during exercise. Okay. So you guys talk about different kinds of hormones in phys. Talk about steroid hormones, talk about peptide hormones. Okay. So let me do just a little bit of a brief on those two things, and then we can hopefully this will actually all be up, and we'll be rolling. Okay. So a peptide hormone is for protein based, amino acid based. Peptide hormones can get around in your blood. Let's back up. What makes something a hormone? What makes something sort of part of an endocrine tissue and all that? Yeah.
It has to be able to bind to the receptors to cause a reaction of the
It does. Okay. Very good. That binds to a receptor. Most hormones release. That's going to be endocrine sort of endocrine function. What? Open, please. Please open. Okay. Done plasma glucose. All right, let me do this. Come on. Very good. So the other big thing to remember about non-steroidal or peptide-based hormones is that, is that because they're not based on fat, they can travel in the blood without having to bind. Peptide-based hormones will bind to a receptor on the target of the on the surface. And it's on the outside. Steroid hormones, on the other hand, I think cholesterol-based, that is fat-based. Right? Cholesterol doesn't mix well with water. It has to have something to be able to carry it. And so when we put steroid hormones into the blood, they kind of bind to something like free fatty acids and things to hopefully kind of move it and carry it around. The good thing about steroid hormones, though, is because they have a lipid base, they usually pass through the cell membrane and the membrane on the nucleus. But very, very often, steroid hormones will bind to nuclear receptors. They will bind directly onto the nucleus of the cell. Okay? So things like testosterone will come in, they have a receptor in the nucleus. Whereas insulin, which is a peptide hormone, or non-steroidal hormone, binds to a receptor on the surface of the cell. Okay. It's kind of beyond the scope of what we want to get into to talk about the ins and outs and the hows and the whys of why are some this, why are some the others, what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a surface receptor versus having a nuclear receptor and all of that. I just want you guys to know basically the difference between the two. Okay. And so I've got sort of what a steroid hormone would do, right? Imagine this is, let's say, testosterone, it's found with carrier protein in the blood. It then moves itself into the cell, and then it's going to bind to itself on a receptor that's either in the cytoplasm or right here on the nucleus, and it's going to then directly drive it. Right? That's in your RNA protein synthesis. If you think about it being testosterone. Okay. Whereas a peptide hormone or a non-steroidal hormone binds to a receptor on, say, the lemma of muscle cell or on the surface of the cell. It then oftentimes is coupled to something called, you guys learned about G proteins and all of the other kind of crazy signaling pathways, right? These will bind to that, and then very often G proteins are coupled to adenylate cyclase. You make cyclic AMP, blah, blah, blah. We start phosphorylating things downstream. And then something else happens, which then either modifies stuff that's going on or may modify something. Okay? So at the end of the day, all of them are going to evoke some sort of a response. It's just how they get there, where they bind, maybe a little bit. And I'll try to point out the kind of distinct differences in the individual hormones that I think are going to be particularly important for all of that. Okay. So I do want you guys to know a little bit about this. Okay. There are going to be some very kind of rough, big picture endocrine organs that I want you all to be aware of. Two of the big ones are going to be the hypothalamus and pituitary brain. Okay. Then there's your thyroid gland, which is here, kind of on the front side of your throat. We have the adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex, right, which are the adrenal glands are going to sit on top of the kidneys. We have the pancreas. You can also argue that in some instances, the kidney itself, especially we use these hormones to regulate water. Okay. And then we have what we're going to call kind of loosely the gonads, which would be either the ovaries and testes, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. Okay. Those are going to have, especially testosterone, going to have some effects on kind of regulating blood glucose responses to exercise. Estrogen, it's a little bit more complicated. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do, we're going to walk through some individual hormones. I want you guys to know, where does the hormone come from? Okay. What is its endocrine gland? Basically, is it a peptide hormone or is it a steroid hormone? And then what is its primary function? Most of this is going to be in the context of how would that function relate. Okay. So we'll start with insulin. We're going to start with insulin. You guys should have learned about all of this in principles of health and fitness. I hope talk about it in the context of diabetes. Okay. So in normal healthy people, you eat carbohydrates, your blood glucose rises, the pancreas, right? The beta cells release insulin. Insulin then comes, binds to a receptor on the membrane of muscle tissue or adipose tissue or the liver, and it's going to then start a signaling process. We would call it a signaling cascade. The end point of that cascade with insulin, I absolutely want you to notice, is that a glucose receptor called GLUT4, which is normally stored in vesicles inside of muscle cells or liver cells, GLUT4 moves from inside of the target cell out to the membrane. That GLUT4 molecule then, as glucose flows by in the blood, grabs glucose, pulls it into the cell, and then the GLUT4 can get recycled and repackaged and wait for the next the next insulin. Okay? So blood glucose rises, insulin drives it into muscle cells via GLUT4. Okay? There's GLUT1, there's GLUT2, there's obviously a GLUT3. Some tissues have other things, but primarily in muscle, the way that we get carbohydrates in is through GLUT4. Okay. You guys with me so far? Doing okay? All right. One of the big things that insulin does, as what that thing Jasmine pointed out for us, is that insulin promotes glycogen synthesis in the liver and in the mind. Okay? By driving extra carbohydrate in, one of the big goals then is drive it in, put more in than we need for metabolism. Now store it. Okay? Now store it. I'll do a little aside here, which I bet it's not really gross science, but will show up in a oh, that's on the next one. Okay. We're at the Disney, we're at Epcot, right? See some different things, you see sort of human history and all of this. 10,000 years ago, how do we find food? There was not Chick-fil-A, right? We couldn't shoot a Chick-fil-A. How do we get food 10,000 years ago? We did forage, right? We were hunter-gatherers in that way. Okay? I told you guys that today you had to go out and forage for food. How many of you think you can find food today? Okay? How many of y'all? I just in, okay? No, you're like, I got this? Okay, great. Okay? What's going to happen to the rest of y'all? You didn't get food today. You're going to be hungry? Okay? What if you find food tomorrow? You're going to use up your glycogen today. You're going to metabolize fat today. Okay? So, to understand glucose metabolism in some ways, and in some ways this also helps us understand part of what our obesity is likely driven by. Is you have to understand, and I'm going to use a word, and hopefully the Board of Regents nobody will get mad at me. Okay? You have to understand the idea of human evolution. Okay? Evolution. We evolved from hunter-gatherer. Okay? And at some point in time, Chick-fil-A appeared. At some point in time, Cece's Pizza appeared. Okay? Where you can just go, okay, you can get very, very sort of calorically dense food, you can do a lot of. Okay? Well, our genes, genetically, the way our cells function, is really not designed for that sort of an environment. The selective pressure on things from way back in the day was, if I can't find food today, I need to be able to use my stored stuff, and then when I do find food, eventually, hopefully, I need to be able to eat in excess and be really, really good at storing any of the excess. Okay? That's where this has come from. Okay? I may not get to eat today, so I use some stored glycogen. I use some stored adipose. I do get to eat tomorrow, so I better be really, really good at driving that extra glucose beyond what I need into these cells to replenish glycogen, into adipose tissue to try to replenish adipose tissue. That's how our bodies are set up to function. Also, if you're a hunter-gatherer, okay, how active are you? Really, really active. So we evolved with selective pressure of needing to be very active, and we evolved a set of genes that is exceptionally good at storing. Okay? And we now live in a society where we don't have to be active. Right? We don't have to be active. And the majority of people have much easier access to food than that. And it's highly palatable. And so we eat enough, and we're really good at storing it, so voila. Okay? So that's part of what's going on. And that's part of what's going on. That's how that's going to function. So that's how we get glucose in. Okay? You guys mentioned glucagon. We're going to talk a little bit now about how do we, let's just say, I haven't eaten anything, my blood glucose is beginning to dip a little. How am I going to raise it? How am I going to get back to where I need to be? Well, one of the primary ones is glucagon. Okay? It also comes from the pancreas. It's also a peptide hormone. You release it when glucose is low. And in many ways, it's considered the anti-insulin. And so what it does is it breaks down glycogen from the liver. As blood glucose drops, remember, liver glycogen is our storage site to primarily replenish blood glucose. Okay? Primarily to replenish blood glucose. It also promotes gluconeogenesis, so having the liver make glucose from non-glucose precursors, and it promotes fat mobilization. This is going to be kind of a counterintuitive. Okay? If you release glucagon, and it's going to break down fat, it's going to put free fatty acids into the blood. Okay? Why might that be a useful thing if I have low-ish blood glucose? I think critical. Why, if I have relatively low blood glucose, one of the primary things that all of these hormones that are going to try to raise my glucose, they also try to increase fat mobilization, putting fat. What would that be good? Why would increasing fat in the blood be good from a glucose standpoint? Fat stores more energy, okay? So I've gotten this large store, this kind of very energy dense thing out of storage. Do it now.
Take it through multiple pumps. It says that you would let the energy on the pump, like doing it out to like, I forget what the first one is, and then it ends.
Yeah, we're going to get into correction. We're going to metabolize fat, right? So again, this is why understanding metabolism is of such key importance. Okay? If I use fat, what am I therefore? I get energy from fat. What am I not going to have to use? Okay? Not going to have to use glucose. One of the ways to preserve blood glucose is to just not use it. Okay? And one of the ways to just not use it is to just dump a bunch of fat into the blood, put fat into the muscle cells, put fat into the Krebs cycle or free beta oxidation, and get energy that way. So the more fat that is available, we'll use that. And therefore, we then will not use glucose. Using fat also does another thing from a fatigue standpoint. It preserves glucose. What am I never going to make? If I use fat and it goes to air apples, what am I never going to make? Lactic acid. Right? When you use fat for eating, you maintain blood glucose. You also never make lactic acid. Therefore, you can never have a drop in pH. Lactic acid causes both central and peripheral. It inhibits everything. It can cause peripheral fatigue, but also it causes a burning sensation in muscles. That may make people stop. Right? So that's the utility of this. Break down glycogen, dump some more glucose into the blood and try to maintain that. So the muscles have some, the brain has some. Do gluconeogenesis, dump more glucose in, but also mobilize fat. So that maybe I can use more fat than I won't have to use glucose. Okay? That makes sense. This is really, really important to understand what happens during that and why substrate use during exercise. Okay. Also going to be really helpful when we talk about Gatorade, Powerade, sports drinks, or anybody that does long distance stuff about how we might try to glycogen load and increase our muscle ability. Which we'll come to probably not today, it'll probably be on Wednesday. Okay? Okay. Now, thyroid hormone is kind of a funky. Okay? I always ask this, and if you don't have anybody that's either hyper or you guys, most people that we get are hypo. Yeah. Okay. So our cat, my dog when I was growing up was actually hyper. Cat has extra. Right? We could all be so lucky. Well, there's some problems with being hyper. But there are two primary thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. right? T3 is called triiodothyronine, and then T4 is called thyroxine. Most of the stuff that you guys who are hypo, most of T4, which is artificial T4, comes from the thyroid gland right here. One of the big things that thyroid hormone does is it helps us regulate metabolism. Okay? People that are hypothyroid, they do not make enough thyroid hormone, tend to have a relatively slowed metabolism in comparison. Okay? I can take a hypothyroid person, I can give them some dose of thyroxine, raise their thyroid levels, and I can change their personality. Okay? They'll go from being kind of slower and sluggish and these things, and they'll immediately perk up. If I give them too much, and they get real fidgety and everything. It's kind of it's a really, really interesting thing. Okay? So thyroid hormone is very important for regulating kind of basal metabolism. It plays a big role in helping us control weight and energy levels. We don't fully understand all of the complex interactions there. But the other big thing that it does, and why it's important from an exercise standpoint, it's important to have sort of adequate levels or normal levels, is that thyroid hormone is what we call permissive. Okay? Thyroid hormone lets other hormones exert their effects more fully. It lets other pathways, other hormones function correctly. Okay? It especially does this with epinephrine. It especially does this with epinephrine. Okay? And epinephrine is often we think of it as a stress hormone. Okay? We'll talk about epi and norepi in just a minute, but it does those kinds of things. Okay? So that's kind of what's going on. We'll talk about what happens with thyroid hormone with exercise, but its interactions are complex. It doesn't exactly do anything to regulate glucose metabolism per se, or fat metabolism per se, but it has some effects kind of in general on metabolic rate and how some of our other things. Okay? So getting these levels correct, getting the proper response of these hormones during exercise is really, really important and really key. Okay. So you guys can think of epinephrine and norepinephrine, what we usually call the catecholamines as hormones. You can also think of them as neurotransmitters. A lot of that just comes down to where they are produced. Okay? But in a very general sense, we think of them as hormones when they get into the blood. We're going to look at a couple of functions, especially related to glucose and fat metabolism. Okay? So from a hormonal standpoint, epi and norepi come from the adrenal medulla. So they come from the adrenal glands which sit on top of it. Okay? They're peptide hormones. Okay? And they do a whole host of different functions, most of which loosely fall under what we call the fight or flight response. Okay? So epi and norepi have some effects on the nervous system. They have some effects on the heart, the cardiovascular system. They have some very powerful effects on blood vessels and controlling where blood flows. Okay? But they also, if you increase these metabolic rate with them, if you increase those, glycogen gets broken down in the liver. Fat gets mobilized out of adipose tissue. As I said, they increase heart rate, they increase contraction force, they tend to raise cardiac output, they increase blood pressure, and then they also increase breathing rate. Okay? So think about fight or flight. Again, back to hunter-gatherer. Okay? And we have encountered, I don't know, grizzly bear, or whatever the precursor of a grizzly bear was. So what we want to do then is raise metabolic rate, dump glucose into the bloodstream, metabolize fat, and then increase cardiac output of where the blood flows so that all of that stuff in the blood gets to our muscles, increase breathing so we've got lots of oxygen. They're really going to prepare us for muscle contractions by providing fuel, increasing contraction force. Okay? That's what they're going to do. Now, the effects in the cardiovascular system are going to be a little bit different between epinephrine and norepinephrine. We're not going to get too fussed up about it. What does epi do that's different from norepi? We're not going to talk about that there are actually different kinds of receptors. And epi and norepi can bind to more than one kind of receptor. Beta receptors, they can bind alpha receptors, and they sometimes will exert opposite effects depending upon the concentration of those receptors. Okay. We'll do a little bit of that when we get into cardiovascular system. But right now, all I want you to know is that this is generally what it's going to do. That's generally what it's going to do. Okay. Now let's talk about cortisol. Cortisol is also an interesting one. Okay. I bet if I asked many of you that are left cortisol in, right? Stress hormone, I have too much cortisol, this is called obesity. It has in a lot of ways kind of, I think, gotten a bad rap in a lot of instances. Okay? It is a steroid hormone. Cortisol has a cholesterol base. Okay? Rather, it also comes from the adrenal gland, the adrenal cortex. And even though it comes from a slightly different place, and it's a steroid hormone rather than peptide hormone, it does a lot of the same things that glucagon and epinephrine and norepinephrine. It is one of the primary ways with glucagon that we try to maintain plasma glucose levels. So again, if you haven't had breakfast this morning, cortisol level will be a little bit higher. Now, also, if you're stressed out for whatever reason, you're worried about how you're going to test and how that's going to go, then same things. Okay? So, one of the things that it does, though, that makes it a little bit different, why it potentially has some side effects if it's elevated chronically, is that cortisol also increases protein breakdown. Okay? So, cortisol will take muscle and break it down. And it does that because it's trying to provide amino acids from protein to be converted into glucose through gluconeogenesis. Okay? It also mobilizes fat, so it does the same thing that glucagon does. It does mostly the same thing that epinephrine and norepinephrine does, but it also will try to dump some protein so that we can make extra glucose through gluconeogenesis. Okay? Same kind of thing. Now, also, and this is kind of an interesting one, is it blunts inflammation. Anybody ever had a cortisone shot? Taking prednisone or something like that? Okay? That's basically what they're doing. They're trying to blunt inflammation. So, I had, which we probably shouldn't have done, I have impingement in my right shoulder from throwing a baseball for years and years and years and years and years. And so when I was 15, I had cortisone injection into sort of my shoulder capsule. And of course, once they've done it once, then your chances of the second one, like rupturing everything in there, goes up dramatically, especially the shoulder. It's probably not our wisest thing, but very, very common thing. You've got joint problems, joint issues, they inject. They will give you a cortisone injection in there to try to knock down the inflammation. And then when the inflammation can go away, then you can have less pain, swelling, there'll be less irritation, you've got tendinitis, those kinds of things. Very, very powerful tool. Okay? I've also had cortisone injections in between my vertebrae. I have neck issues. From C4 to C6, I have bone spurs from ramming my head into other people playing football in high school and junior high. And so one of the things they do now is they'll give you kind of neural injection there. You want to, I will say this, and it's mostly facetious, but it's also very, very true. You guys want to make a lot of money doing this stuff. Okay. I had 3 injections that my insurance paid for. I don't know, it was like 10 grand or something to have it done. They lined us up, the guy, the anesthesiologist who kind of Norman Regional that did it. He would do it on Monday. And he did 14 people before lunch. They just wheel you in, they put this X-ray thing over your vertebrae, and that's another anesthesiologist that gives you just a little bit of nitrous, a little bit, just kind of make you loopy, and line it up. They put the needle in, they use the imaging, they put the needle in, inject, sit there. The whole thing takes 10 minutes. You have to sit in there for 15 minutes or it doesn't count as a surgery, and they can't bill your insurance as much. But I mean, we were lined up on gurneys in the hallway, just right? I mean, in a day, the guy billed insurance like close to $150,000 in a morning, okay, you do that every Monday. One of the best ways to treat low back pain, all these kinds of things. It works. You really do feel a lot better on all of those things. Now, if you're also going to be an anesthesiologist, doing surgery, you got to be under for like 8 hours. It's super fucking stressful. It's your knee in those ways in the midst of that. But it's a pretty crazy. This is one of the things that we get from cortisol. That's why what do we use it in sports? Very, very common. Sometimes if you get like a sinus infection and things, sometimes the inflammation is actually worse than like the infection, and they'll give you prednisone or something like all that. There's some side effects to those things. But that's what we're going to get from a cortisol standpoint. Okay. Okay. You guys can see in some ways, when I first put them together, I should probably find some different pictures because this was a popular television show. When I first put something related to this slide together, God, that's been like almost 20 years ago. I don't want to talk about that. Feeling very old today. But growth hormone. We talked about growth hormone as it relates to muscle mass. Okay? It has a lot of other effects. Okay? It causes bone growth, it does things. But growth hormone comes from the anterior pituitary. So it comes from the brain. Okay? It increases amino acid transport, it increases protein synthesis. The other thing it really does, though, that's going to be important from an exercise standpoint, is it blunts the action of insulin and it increases fat mobilization from adipose. Okay? So, one of the big reasons that bodybuilders will take growth hormone is it will lean them out. It will help mobilize and break their fat. Okay? It has just as much of an effect in some ways on that as it does on actual muscle mass. You take the testosterone to really ramp up the muscle mass. You take the growth hormone to cut the fat. And that's going to be the big thing. Okay? So you can have what we call pituitary dwarfism, pituitary giantism, right? If you make not enough growth hormone, not grow very tall. If you make too much growth hormone, you just sort of keep growing in those ways. Pituitary giantism, people have all kinds of skeletal problems, your feet, your knees, and things like that. You can allegedly, I don't know if it was real or not, you can get on Google, get on Amazon right now, and you can potentially buy some growth hormone. I guess you can buy it. Probably not real, but it's out there. Okay? So be aware of those things. But from an exercise standpoint, it mobilizes fat, and it decreases it. Okay. So when we talk about what the hormone response during a bout of exercise is going to be, that's going to be one of the things that we've got to do. Okay, so here we go. Remember our goals during exercise. Okay, as you exercise, let me back up. Okay, let me back up. This is really, really, really important. I apologize. Let me go all the way back to insulin. Okay, now insulin binds. Signal cascade, boom, 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 GLUT4 up to the membrane. Okay, glucose in. Right. You guys want to see some magic? Anybody ever eat a lot of carbs and feel kind of sleepy? That's the insulin response. Okay. Anybody ever eat a lot of carbs and you go for a walk? You don't feel sleepy? Okay. So, one of the interesting things about exercise is when you contract skeletal muscle, okay? All I gotta do, squat, squat, squat. Muscle contractions due to blood glucose, exactly the same thing that insulin does. It works through the exact same pathway. Every time you contract a muscle, you don't understand how, someone will figure it out. That will be the cure to diabetes. They will win a Nobel Prize. Okay? They've been after this for about 60 years and it's still on fire. But somebody will figure this out. Muscle contractions drive GLUT4 to the membrane of muscle cells to draw glucose in, just like insulin does. Okay? So you eat like I did the other day while I was grading your tests over the weekend. I don't know how many Starbursts I ate, but it was a lot. Right? It was a lot of Starbursts. Love Starbursts. Halloween, we got a bag of candy. My daughter, we went trick-or-treating at Disney World. giving out a bunch of Starbursts, just handfuls of candy. She doesn't like them. I'm like, great, that will start. Anyway, all I gotta do, boom, 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 squat. Root 4 goes to the membrane, suck all of that extra glucose from those Starbursts out of my blood, store it as glycogen. Bring it into the muscle, use it as energy. So when you do that, you don't have to release insulin. Okay? You don't have to release insulin. We call this the insulin-like effect of exercise. Please write this down. I promise you it will be on the test. Muscle contractions exert an insulin-like effect. And you guys know that makes sense, right? When I contract the muscle, I'm probably using carbohydrate. At least a little bit, okay? And so the natural response then is, ooh, we're contracting, start bringing some more fuel, okay? It would be great if there was a sort of muscle contraction-like effect to drive fat in as well. It's a little less, that doesn't work quite. We're really good at this. It's the insulin-like effect of exercise. And we have to understand that. Or the actual hormone response to exercise. Okay. Now, I'll answer this. Anybody know what type 2 diabetic? You say statistically that seems to be flawed. But a few of you guys know what type 2 diabetic. Okay? We can basically treat type 2 diabetes with diet and exercise, as long as it's relatively high. Because when you exercise, right, when you clear the glucose out, we can prevent the crazy. When you type 2 diabetic, your cells don't respond to the insulin. Just go for a walk. You get the same effect, basically. So we can help control blood glucose. Exercise does some other things as well. They're pretty cool. Making it more sensitive. That's one of the big. Okay, so our goals during exercise. I start contracting my muscles. I start drawing blood glucose in. I start using it in glycolysis. I start using it through the Krebs cycle. So blood glucose may immediately begin to fall. Okay? That's a no-no. The brain does not want that to happen. That can lead to central fatigue, or worse, it leads to coma, then death. Okay? So what we want to do is then to match glucose being taken out of the blood by muscle to glucose release from the liver. Exactly. You want to hold that exactly constant. So I'm doing curls, I'm squatting, I'm contracting, sucking some glucose out. Then I need my liver then to put just that exact same amount back in so that my blood glucose remains constant. Okay? When it remains constant, the brain stays happy, the muscles stay happy, and we can exercise. The other thing that we want, it's not as important, but from a long-term exercise, it is beneficial from a fatigue standpoint, is to try, if at all possible, to not use up all of our muscle life. Okay? Weird things happen when you use up muscle glycogen. You use up all the muscle glycogen, even if you have low glucose, even if you have enough fat, that also tends to cause central fatigue. Somehow the brain knows when your muscle glycogen is all gone, and it starts saying red flag, red flag, red flag. Okay, bad deal, bad deal. Let's slow down. So our goals during exercise are to match muscle glucose uptake by liver release of glucose so that we stay constant, and if at all possible, to try to spare glycogen. And the primary way that we spare glycogen is by using fat. Okay? So think of it in this way. Our goals during exercise are to release glucose from the liver, release fat from adipose tissue, and hope that those two things, if at all possible, will maintain blood glucose and keep us from using as much muscle. It's not always going to be the case. That's the primary. Okay? So, I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes. Person sitting next to you, close your computers. Okay? Close your computer. All your things. All your things. Okay? With the person next to you, I want you to write out what you think happens during exercise. 2, insulin, glucagon, thyroid hormone, epi, norepi, cortisol, growth hormone. Okay? Pardon? It is a thing we are going to turn it in. Okay? So, write it down. Put your name on it. You got like 3 minutes. What happens to these things during exercise? Up, down, and the same. Those are your options. Do the hormones go up? Do they go down? Do they stay the same? Yes. Insulin. Glucagon. Thyroid hormone. Epinephrine and norepinephrine. We kind of collectively consider together. Cortisol. Growth hormone. Right. Very nice. All you need, guys, for the answer is up, down, the same. I don't need like, oh, it goes up 2 times or 7 times. It's up, down, or the same. All that matters. All that matters. Okay. Let's do this. Okay? Who thinks you have the right answer for insulin? That's all your hand first. What y'all got?
You need to go down during exercise because it was kind of like a thing where I was thinking about glucagon and what it would do, and so since insulin pulls the glucose out of the bloodstream and you need glucose for energy level, it would like to go down during exercise so that you keep your like the excess.
Right. They say down. How many people put down? How many people put the same? How many people put up? Somebody that said up, why do you think it goes up? What does insulin do? Okay? So it puts the glucose where? Okay? You think when we exercise that we need glucose in the muscle? Okay? Does that make sense? That's completely wrong. Jasmine said it's correct. Okay? Now, so insulin is the weird one. Insulin's the weird one. Okay? Here's the problem. I definitely need glucose in my muscles when I exercise. I absolutely do. Okay? Metabolic rate goes up. I need more substrate. I need it. So if insulin goes down, which it does, if it didn't, you'd all be dead. Every time you exercise, you would go to. How am I going to get the glucose that we know is going to go into my cells? How am I going to get it in there? Muscle contraction. Okay? This is why, if you ever exercise with a type 1 diabetic, make them eat something like a candy bar before they go and exercise. It doesn't matter if they have an insulin pump and they're maintaining things or they're taking insulin injection. The worry is contractions draw glucose in. If we put insulin on top of all of that, we're going to drive so much glucose in that we may become hypoglycemic. Okay? So if insulin didn't go down, you'd all go into a coma every time you lose that. Unless you just had a bad stomach. Okay? So insulin's the weird. You would think by what it does that it ought to maybe go up during exercise. It does. Okay. All right. Glucagon, up or down? Anybody say down? Good. Exactly right. Growth hormone, up or down? Okay. Cortisol, up or down? You're both correct. Cortisol goes up and then it comes back down to zero. Okay. Epi and norepi, up or down? Okay. Thyroid hormone. So I can give you all your tests back. We'll talk more about this on Wednesday. During exercise, pretty much every hormone except for insulin goes up. Okay? And it goes up to break down liver glycogen, break down adipose tissue. So we spare muscle glycogen, we don't lose glycogen, and we maintain blood glucose. Okay. Now, so we're still trying to piece the last couple of weeks in and put together for you guys, but I'm just going to start naming names. You guys can come and get it. Okay? Here's the deal. You can look at it for a few minutes, but I gotta have them back. Because we obviously have not recorded it. The other thing, some of you did not do corrections on the first time. If you would like to do them this time, great. But I need you to tell me that, and then you make yours today. Okay? All right. Here we go. Emma. Come in here. Yes, you are turning that in. Okay. Emma, Lincoln. Taylor. Italy. Turner. Durrell. Jacob. Ella. Caitlin. Allison. Sarah. Okay. You are Caitlin Allison. You are Allison. Yeah, sorry. Okay. My bad. Sorry, everybody. Confusion. Sarah. Rachel. Alexis. Tyler. Hey. Aaron. Sydney. Brittany. Ethan. Alyssa. Alyssa. Amazing. Dawn. Where's the Lake Dawn? Sydney Green. Harley. Hannah. Jake. Pierce. Bailey. Sierra. Carissa. Colby. Roger. Ivan. Taylor. Good work. Hunter. Hannah. Jonathan. Allison. Taylor. Bethany. Holly. Grab the rest. We can just sort of piece them together. Zoe. Haley. So. Warren. Jonathan. Here. Slowly, it's okay. Sorry, so we'll just hang out. Aaron. Victoria. Dylan. Last couple we haven't been able to add everything together. You just gotta add your numbers together. There's so many of y'all. We're doing a bang up job here. Jackson. Jack. Other Victoria. Kristen. Okay. All right, I need you to test back. We can talk more about them on Wednesday. Grace and Skylar. Email y'all. 30 minutes. Got them, we didn't get to them. Oh, we didn't get them, but we get them. Didn't send them to me until Friday, so I couldn't get them to you. Yes, yeah. Oh, okay. Y'all can just give them to me. Together. I'll give you 30 minutes.
Well,
They didn't get your love. We're on it like that. All right, I ran into pregnant this morning and, I'll give you.
Okay. Now they're always human physiology doing great the same day. They're always doing something.
All right, thanks, Bud.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, okay, that's fine. No worries.
and I have somebody.
We'll see you in a couple hours. Yes, sir.
I know, probably not.
I know, I don't not.
But it's better than my class right after. Some motion.
You're welcome. How was the next test, Jen?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So just so you know. Here's one. You're going for a limited reason. If you need or want to do it. Okay.